Thank you for joining us today with Let's Go to Space, Blue Sky Learning. Normally, my colleague Shawna introduces our podcast, but today we have the unique and distinct privilege and honor of interviewing Shawna Christenson, and so you're forced to listen to me, Kevin Simmons, be the moderator for today's podcast. So let me begin by introducing our very important guest, Shawna Christenson. She is co-founder of the Aerospace and Innovation Academy. She is co-author of the book Blue Sky Learning, a guide for how teachers can start their own CubeSat teams. She has a number of other roles that she plays in the community and especially in areas related to aerospace and education. But let me just begin by saying she is a tremendous ally and a really genuinely good friend and a really hard worker. So I like that. And welcome to our podcast.
Thank you, Kevin. Hello, audience. It's so much fun to be on the other side of the microphone, so to speak. So I fully expect to be making faces at Kevin as we do this to try to throw him off. That's going to be my goal.
Okay, so let's begin with the easy questions first. You have taught for a number of years in South Florida. How about you begin by telling us a little bit about your educational background as it relates to public speaking, debates, and English, literature, language arts?
Well, right, because those first two that you mentioned, which is kind of how you know me at this point, really isn't how I got my start in teaching. I knew I wanted to become a teacher when I was as early, I would say as young as maybe 6 or 7 years old. I started to play school with my kid sister and her younger friends, and they were very, very young. So I overheard my mother one day share with some friends that I was going to make a great teacher someday. I hadn't really thought much about it, but I realized, now as I'm older, that a lot of things that our parents say, even if we think aren't really going into our kids' heads, they kind of stick there. So early on, I kind of thought, oh, I'm supposed to be a teacher. Years later, in high school, when I was excelling in English, and I had some really good experiences with some great English teachers who had, taught me to love literature. I thought, well, okay, so I'm supposed to be a teacher. I guess I'm good at English. This is kind of where I belong. And I kind of beat out the whole wiki-watchy, mermaid idea that as a child, I thought maybe I would do that as well. So I thought, okay, this one at least is employable.
Excuse me, for those of you listening to the podcast that don't know her last reference, there's a place in Florida where women would wear mermaid tails and entertain.
Oh, I love how you're capitalizing on my childhood vision of being a mermaid. Listen, any one of us who lived here in South Florida, we wanted to be those beautiful women who could somehow breathe underwater. It was quite a thing. And of course, just like all things, as time that attraction is no more, you cannot visit it. So it's a good thing I didn't go down that career path. Anyway, yes, I did become a teacher. I graduated in 98 is when I came to South Florida. In part, I moved here from where I was at UCF in the time to help take care of my grandmother. My mother passed away when I was 19, so my brother kind of had the sole responsibility of looking after my grandmother, and so I thought I could be of some help in that way. Came down having just graduated, not realizing you're supposed to go to these job fairs well in advance, so it's basically summer when I move here, and all the jobs are filled, but I've got to find a job. So I was able to, I had what was left over, let's put it that way. And no insult at all to my first school, because I had such a great experience teaching at Forest Hill High School. And what was great about that experience was my first principal was probably one of the best leaders that I've ever had. And he instilled in me that it doesn't matter how old or how young the students are in your class, and if there's like a disparity in ages. For me, I wasn't the youngest of teachers coming out, but I was probably only 5 years older than my first students. And he really impressed in me the idea that, being a teacher is not about having the right age or even having necessarily a certain pedigree. It was just about doing what you love with kids and getting them to love it too. So that was great. But I got into debate probably 5 years after that. I had since moved over. I followed my first mentor, who she was my department chair at Forest Hill. And so I followed her over to Dwyer. And it was at Dwyer that I became a debate coach. One of my English colleagues and friends there had been doing the program. She was looking to get out of it. And, I told her, I said, I don't have any experience with debate. I mean, drama, yes, I definitely did, theater for 4 years in high school, but we didn't have a debate team. And it just sounds like just not something I would ever have wanted to do. But she reminded me that, getting involved and trying something that you haven't done before, and being a coach of something looks really good on your resume, and it kind of guarantees you to have that position, as you're looking to advance to other schools. So I took it on there, and I haven't looked back. Gosh, somehow I thought I would just take it on as a way to, do something to get it on my resume, but I ended up loving it. And what I loved about debate, my first time going into a tournament was, I was starting to get a little disgruntled about the educational system. I was getting disgruntled about kids, and, you're older when you're like, these kids today. And I went to a debate tournament, and I realized that these kids, if they're the ones who are running the world, we're going to be okay. So I love the idea that students are forced to kind of think about more than an opinion. They have to see both sides of an issue. They're forced to research and understand the difference between what is credible and what is not. I think so many adults are lacking that today. So for me, I think everyone should go back and take debate.
Excellent, excellent. How would you say, what have been the most meaningful changes to your classroom style or your teaching style over the years? How would you say you've sort of evolved as an educator? Because I'm sure if you start out in the classroom when you're really young, you have certain viewpoints and certain thinking, but as you actually are in the trenches and doing it, it gets modified. So what would you say is how have you evolved as a teacher?
Well, I think there are a couple of ways. One, I think, is confidence. I think when you're a brand new teacher, you are, even if you understood everything that you did in school, and hopefully you took classes in pedagogy, not just in your content area, right? To be prepared. And UCF had a great teaching program. I did 2 internships long before I went into the classroom. I did an internship in high school as well as in middle school. But it doesn't take away from the fact that what you are learning doesn't translate to a classroom. And I did all of my internships up in the Orange County, Volusia County area. So when I came to teach in Palm Beach County, it was a completely different place. It looked different. The students were different. So ultimately you learn to build confidence. My first days of teaching, I would come home and cry thinking this is not what I expected. I had planned out my lessons for a whole year only to find out that I had to throw those out and start over again because, my students were different. So I think confidence, number one. Number two, I've also learned with the advent of COVID that technology is an important aspect of teaching. And I've had to kind of reinvent myself a few times as I've taken on new classes that I haven't had before. So I've had to become a lot more tech savvy. But as far as overall philosophies about education, not much has changed. I may be old school, I still believe that some of the things that we did when I was, the way we learned when I was in school, while it's not right for every student, I think it's a really great base to start, that when we throw out all of those classics, when we throw out all of the traditional ways of learning, I think we lose a lot. So I can see where learning styles are important in dealing with students, but from a philosophical aspect, I believe all kids can learn. How they learn may be different, but at the same time, still from that old school mentality where you're going to try something and you're going to do it until you learn it.
Right. Well, in the 6 years that I've known you, I have seen numerous students thrive and achieve national recognition in debate. For our audience, Shawna is an officer in the Palm Beach County
Middle School Forensic League.
Middle School Forensics League. And she is a past president as well. What's the difference in training students to debate versus working with teachers and parent coaches and judges?
In education in general, we have a real problem with turnover. Teachers leave very quickly. They don't have mentors and role models. And that's even more true in clubs where oftentimes young teachers are forced into taking them on without having any experience. That certainly was my experience, and I was really lucky to have somebody on site to mentor me there. We have a very good, at the time I was teaching high school, so we have a very solid high school league here with officers who've been around for a very long time, and they're still there. And they were instrumental. I mean, I had to, when you talked in a former podcast episode about mimicking, right? And, kind of using examples of other people's and kind of following that. I did that with Paul Gaba from Wellington. I mean, he had a great team. He was very helpful and instrumental in helping me to be a coach. And I just used his material with his permission to be able to kind of model that. So I emulated, this is a good plan. I'm going to model this with my team.
I believe he's still coaching today. Correct?
Oh, absolutely. He's officers in the league and more than one. He's nationally recognized coach. Yeah. So you've got to find somebody, I think, that you can emulate, somebody that will be a mentor to you. I like that quote that I often listen to on some of the podcasts. You are the average of the 5 people you hang with, and finding somebody, if you're going to be a coach, to work with parents is important. I will add this. I think working with new coaches is really important. I think that we can do more to have a mentor program where someone's assigned, a coach who has more experience, but we also have a really good material at the national level. So by joining some of those organizations, just like in science or in aerospace, you're joining organizations, debate coaches can join these organizations too. So for example, the National Speech and Debate Association has not only ways for you to connect with new coaches, but there's material and curriculum. And it's just a matter of, it may seem overwhelming, but you just got to get in there and just kind of be open. If you were thrown into debate coaching, you may end up finding that it's not for you, but if you find you love it, like I did, there is material there, and there certainly are people willing to help you. You just have to seek it out.
Right. So my first trip with students to Capitol Hill was in 2006, I believe. And I immediately saw the value of students at Congress speaking to them, but I had no training or frankly, no interest in more of the policy and in-depth advocacy. I saw it as simply a way to advance aerospace. Now, all of a sudden, you and I end up at the same school, and in February or January 2016, we make our first joint trip to Congress with combined, our students that we share. Do you have any recollections about those early trips to Congress?
Well, I think you're forgetting about the extensive work we did on a grant for the NSF, if I recall, which did not come to fruition.
That was the next summer, I believe.
I don't know. I think we did that first. That's how I got involved. I know it's a weird time thing, but it started really with that. And that's how I got involved in what you were doing. I realized very quickly, again, speech and debate people, right? Public speaking where I was at the school was required at the time, but it was hit or miss depending upon what administration was there. So I realized that I needed to kind of do something to make myself a little bit more, to have more staying power. And that's when I tied my cart to you. That's how I kind of refer to it that way. I was like, these kids are going to be speaking about CubeSats. I don't know what they are, but I'm going to help them speak about it articulately. So that's how we got involved. You invited me, I believe, in the trip in 2016. It was at an incredibly difficult and stressful time in my life, having had a death in the family and having wrecked a vehicle. And I remember like turning around a week after all of this horrible trauma was going on and having to go to DC. And it was this blur. But from that, I realized that was exactly where I needed to be at a time in my life where I was making such a huge chapter change, right? Like it was a time of catharsis for me, but I was reinventing myself at the same time from all of this, like the phoenix and the ashes kind of thing. It was the right place and the right time. And I think for me, it really kind of forged an interest that probably had been underlining in policy for a very long time that I just didn't know was there.
Sure. And I'm going to cue this up and I will let you go as deep into it as you'd like. But I took some of my students to Utah to this small sat conference in, I want to say 2017. And we were talking to one of the NASA people, one of the managers of the program, and said, we enjoy your program so much. How can we give back? And he said, well, if I had a little more money, perhaps I could fund more student projects. And then the kids, the same students that are these aerospace students at the conference are also your debate students. And I'll let you pick up the story from there.
I didn't know it actually stemmed from there. I mean, for me, when I started working with the legislation, I think that's what you're referring to. It was, again, because we were at a small school, we shared the same students, and invariably, if they were in your aerospace, they were going to be taking debate because they had to learn to speak well. But I remember having a conversation with the team about how come their friends at other schools weren't doing things like CubeSats. And so at the high school league, and certainly we were competing at this point in various, middle and high school leagues, we had to come up with a piece of legislation in order to enter the local tournament. And so we started talking about that as a real world problem. And so we turned in what was just a rudimentary, very basic debate style, probably a resolution for a tournament. We contacted our congressman, who I believe was up for re-election. So it was really good timing for all of us, just to see, hey, by the way, how can we make a change? These kids want to understand.
I think that was his first term. Right.
He was going to be before, first re-election. So it worked out to where by reaching out, we just sent this very basic resolution to Congressman Brian Mast's people at the time. And we were also making appointments for the advocacy work that we were doing. So it kind of just worked out that they took that and they worked with our kids, and they were very helpful in having lunch meetings where they helped take the resolution and turn it in and showed us how they do the research of it. And it got introduced to Congress while we were there for one of our advocacy sessions. And of course, that first iteration was to increase awareness of the CubeSat launch initiative. And I guess that's how it kind of connects with what you were saying. How do we increase awareness that kids can even access these, not just universities, but on high schools and middle schools as well? And we also learned from that process that just because something is enacted, or rather introduced, that doesn't mean it's a bill or anything like that. So we had to pick it up and revisit it again the following year. So it was reintroduced, this time as a way to use CubeSats as a disruptive educational tool.
Sure. I believe the session ended, and with the new Congress, it had to be reintroduced.
Yeah,
and,
we got to change that. I mean, the idea that something has to be reintroduced every year, it just seems like part of the bureaucracy of our system might be a little laborsome.
So we've gone from just purely teaching language arts or English literature and debate and public speaking, and then in a matter of a couple of years, you've migrated all the way over to congressional advocacy. And frankly, not surprising, you were the 2020 National Speech and Debate Association Middle School Coach of the Year. So that's obviously you are number one. All others are number two or lower.
Well, for that year, I mean, let's face it, there are a lot of good coaches out there.
But national accolades don't come easy in almost anything you do. So and not only that. Which I always think is what we're supposed to do, is to go from being something that we're good at to giving back. And I want to point out some of the things you're involved with, and maybe you can share a little bit about that. In addition to being, I believe, secretary for the Missileers and Space Range Pioneers, you are the K-12 STEM outreach chair for the American Institute of Aeronautics and Astronautics Palm Beach section. And that's just two of the many things that you're doing out there. You were recently elected as a regional coordinator for the Florida Association for the Gifted. So these are all ways that you are giving back. Let's take any one of those and share a little bit about how you got involved or what you're doing there.
Well, when I was traveling with you, at first it was kind of like, all right, you needed a female chaperone. And I would kind of blend into the background, as I was as an introvert, very uncomfortable in a lot of these kind of networking situations that you were training the kids to do. But over time, just like with anything else, with your exposure, you start to see and build your own confidence there. So I mentioned confidence earlier. I would never have said I was a science person. I was always an English type. And yet, just through the exposure, I found a niche within here. And I had to learn how to be able to do what we were asking the kids to do. And so I was able to start to fit in, I guess, with that world. And so I would say that with the joining organizations we mentioned earlier, I joined because I could. You don't have to be an engineer to join the American Institute of Aeronautics and Astronautics. You could just be a teacher. So I was, and I joined, and they needed, gosh, you were a member of the local section, and they needed somebody there. So I just showed up. And I think a lot of it is just showing up, right? I mean, I know you say that with kids a lot, like half of winning is just showing up. Half of getting involved is in getting these titles or whatever is just being there, because so many people don't want to give extra. But for me, I've learned a lot about how the industry works. It's important for me to be able to share that as we're working with the same students. It can't just be you're providing them content, but if I'm there with them as well, I need to be able to have some kind of rationale from why I'm asking them to speak the way they are.
I also think that these organizations provide venues for, you're teaching craft to these students, but they need a place to practice their craft.
And they're different, right? So I think one of the things that makes us, work as the talkies and the techies, and the way we kind of always use that, is that it's really about being able to speak articulately in a variety of venues, right? Whether you're speaking at the White House, or whether you're speaking to NASA headquarters, or you're going to Tallahassee, or you're going to City Hall, or you're just sitting across the table from an adult. It's a big change for kids to be able to have a conversation versus what they might get in a debate tournament, where it's a rehearsed speech, or they're learning somewhat in those kind of events to be able to kind of piggyback off of others' ideas, or how to be able to turn it around. But really, the kind of work that we do with these organizations and the opportunities that the students are provided is really just about how to communicate in different settings. And it's a big deal. It really is, I think, the part of one of the best things that we provide for those students.
Outstanding. And I am a proud member of the AIA Palm Beach section. And between us, we really sort of own the public policy and K-12 arenas.
Right, the irony that you're
irony is I'm the public policy and she's K-12. But let's also point out that in the last 2 or 3 years, we've been, I want to say, first or second nationwide for AIA for chapters, sections our size.
And it wasn't too long ago that our podcast, we had 2 back-to-back in that series, where we talked with Randy, who is the section chair, about being a lifelong engineer and the importance of those organizations, as well as Bruce Tremblay, who's speaking and really gives back to the community. So
he's our treasurer. They're 40-year engineers and just outstanding, just good people. And they've always been supportive of us when we've said, hey, let's support this educational group or this
and they really have supported us when we were, able to work with the teacher PD, the professional development that we're able to do.
It's just exactly what you want. You want to go to your organization and say, we can make a difference here. Will you help? And they say, sure. So let's talk a little bit about how you got involved with AIA and what your recollections are of that and your role is in that. And then one more question
to be clear then for our audience, of course, the AIAA, of which we were just speaking, is a professional organization of, the American Institute of Aeronautics and Astronautics. And I always start off saying it the wrong way, because now our big push, of course, is for the Aerospace and Innovation Academy, or the AIA. So I'm pretty sure you're going to say it's my recollection. It might be different from yours, but we've been working on this together now for probably a good 4 years, where we've talked about the idea. We recognize that the school that we were at formerly, where we both met, we kind of ended at middle school. And what was happening was our high schoolers were still longing for those kinds of opportunities that we were providing. They were not receiving those opportunities in high school at a time that they needed that for college resumes. So we saw the need for kind of a school within a school, the dream that students who are very much interested in aerospace or engineering could have a track, almost like not really a charter school, but again, a track within a school where they could specialize in that. And then by the time they were done, have college credit in aeronautic engineering university. I think we were looking at Embry-Riddle and FIT at the time. So that's how we got involved, and we actually developed a curriculum. We talked with several different people about it, and we've been able to land where we are, which is going to provide us the opportunity to start our after school program to kind of start getting people from around the nation involved. And then ultimately, we hope to be able to put that branch of the school there at the brick and mortar location in Tequesta.
Absolutely. And as she mentioned, we spent 3 years investing in these students, 6th through 8th grade. They were outstanding. After spending 3 years with us, they were highly motivated, really quite good at whatever their particular interests were. And when she says we were capable of going to the White House, we actually did. We were invited to make a presentation, our students were, at the White House Office of Science and Technology Policy. And not only was the director of OSTP there, Drogenmeyer, Dr. Drogenmeyer, I believe, Kelvin Drogenmeyer, but also the Space Technology Policy Council director was there, Scott Pace, Dr. Pace. And what was going to be, a 10-minute presentation, I think we spent 2 hours there at OSTP.
Well, and obviously the thing that's the genesis, I guess, of where you're thinking about how this got started is because they said, how do we replicate this? And honestly, everybody had been asking that. How do you replicate this? Sure, you're at a private school where you've got these wealthy kids, and that's the only reason why you're able to get those things done. But that's not true. That's what we really want to be able to show, that this can be done if you have like-minded teachers who are willing to become those edupreneurs and to share the information and really do that blue sky learning that we espouse.
So we've taken this English teacher who then became a debate, expert. And then we walk into Orlando a couple of years ago and meet with the director of the Florida Space Grant Consortium. And we originally went to ask him for a letter of support for something we were going to try to do at the state level.
Efforts, yeah.
And he was like, how about I just fund a pilot program for you? And the next thing you know, Shawna here is a principal investigator of a grant to help train teachers. And we had some, it took us a while, especially once COVID hit, to spin down her grant. But what was really awesome is we met some really nice teachers. I think of one, Monica Mormon. Mm-hmm. She was the Broward County Teacher of the Year.
We've done a podcast with her and with Dr. J.D.
I literally cannot keep up with all of her accolades. But she's an example of a teacher, just like the students, where our aim is to give them opportunities, right? And I wanted to just acknowledge that you have you've successfully executed your first grant as principal investigator, which is definitely not something that most English teachers do. So that was a big deal. And I know you're just recently at our last meeting, you were elected to be a regional coordinator for South Florida in the FLAG organization. And so I'm looking forward to seeing good things from you there. Last question. So what are you doing and what's your role in AIA, and how did you end up making a Thinkific class, and tell us about that?
Well, my role, I see myself as being kind of like the communications director, so to speak, right? I am responsible for updating our website or doing any social media. And I kind of keep you on the train track. As we talk about me driving the train, I kind of keep you have the big ideas and I have to kind of bring you down. So we read that book that was kind of like one of our business books, right? So you're the visionary, but I'm the integrator. So that is my role in this. But I see ultimately me being the director of the school that we will have within a school, being able to bring students there, obviously in charge of a curriculum that's aligned, where everyone who's there for an aerospace purpose is going to be able to find that curriculum that's going to align them that as well. So as far as the Thinkific class, I think I had mentioned that in the previous podcast that we just did. Essentially, it was the advocacy work that we were doing. I see there are teacher entrepreneurs, again, the edupreneurs who consult with other teachers. And one way that you can take what you're good at is you can make courses. And so if you just start listening to some podcasts from an edupreneurial aspect, you watch some of these classes, you already have enough content to be able to start your own classes. So that's where the Think If It class started. We hope to do a lot more. It does require, a little bit of pre-planning on the content end, but I think it's really the wave of the future now that so many people are learning from home and probably will even long after COVID is gone.
I really think you're underselling your contributions to the company, but just as I just made a quick list of things that I know that she does, or that Shawna did, is she was instrumental in building our webpage, our podcast, the blogs, our whole digital branding, and tools like MailerLite and Canva, et cetera. She's very good at that.
I am definitely learning this.
I want to just share with this interview, I want to point out to other teachers, don't be afraid to step out and do those kinds of things. Don't be afraid to learn new tools and to work on your social and digital footprint and get your brand out there. I really want to thank you for joining us today.
I'm so happy to be on the other side. I didn't have to think too hard.
It was a tremendous, I think a tremendous interview, both from the questions and the answers standpoint. And obviously you are the most valuable member of our team, and I'm really glad to work with you.
Thanks for that. But before we go, I just want to remind people to check out our social media if you want to see the work that I'm learning how to do. So, our Facebook site, we have an Instagram, we're on Pinterest now. You can follow us there. Certainly we're on Twitter, but I also want to give a shout out to our editing staff. Caden Dooner has kind of really helped us out in bringing these podcasts to you on a weekly basis, as it has been, as opposed to just bi-weekly. So it really is a team effort. And as we get larger, we hope that you'll be part of that team.
Sure. Come find us on our YouTube channel, Aerospace and Innovation Academy, or please come to our website, visit with us, Aerospace High, HIGH, aerospacehigh.com.
I'll put all those in the description links.
I'm sorry, I think it's aerospacehigh.org. Try that one.
It'll be correct in the description link. So
thank you again, Shawna, for joining us. Wonderful
thanks for
interview.
having me.
And we hope to see you next week let's try that again. As we say, let's go to space.